So this question here from the exam is one of those questions that as soon as you see it, your mind gets a bit worried because there's a lot of information in this question. But there's a couple of things to remember. The first thing is that it focuses on trig equations, but simple, straightforward trig equations. And that's given away when you see a trig equation written down here. So we know that we're going to be involving those skills for solving them at some point in this question. Now, another thing to remember is that questions like this, a lot of the information is essentially padding to the question to put it into a scenario to see if you can then go into that scenario and extract the information out that's pertinent to your question and pertinent to the way that you have to do the work. Now, when we're going through it, we have to ask ourselves, is there anything relevant in any of these questions? If there's not, I can just ignore it. So firstly, Anna's a grandfather clock in her house. Great, she's got a clock. That actually doesn't feed into the maths of the question or the scenario. So what we can do, so we can just ignore it. There's a picture of a clock, as pretty as it is, again, don't need to worry too much about it. Height of the tip of the air hand above the floor in centimetres is given by that. So it's worth noting that it's the height of the tip above the floor. It's in centimetres, given by that. So we definitely need that. X is the angle the hour hand has rotated through since 12 o'clock. So it's useful to know that. So X being the angle the hour hand has rotated. But this as well is also demonstrated by the diagram. So even if that sentence wasn't there, you could still extract that bit of information from the diagram. So I could have actually gotten rid of that entire sentence and just had the diagram there, where it shows you what the angle X measured. Then it wants me to calculate the first two values for X, for which the tip of the hand is 150 centimetres above the floor. So a key bit for that is it's 150 centimetres above the floor. Now, looking at the question, we know the height of the tip is given by the trig equation there, and we know we want it when the height's 150. So that tells me all the information I need to say that, right, if the height's 150, what I want is I want to solve when 20 cos of x plus 147 is equal to 150. And if I solve that, I can get two values for x which satisfy the scenario. At this stage, we don't even need to look back at that information again. We've taken that whole thing, we've disregarded the bump in the information we don't need, and we've used it to write down a simple equation around trigonometry that we can solve. Now that we have that information, I could essentially ignore everything that was there previously from this point on and just focus on solving this. Now, to solve it, we follow the same steps we normally would when we're solving a trig equation. Get it to a point where we've got just cos x. So I'd move the 147. So I get 20 cos x is equal to 3. Shift the 20, and I get cos x is equal to 3 over 20. From that, I can then find x by doing cos minus 1 of 3 over 20. Now, at this point, involving the cast diagram is what we would do in order to find solutions. Because if you remember, it says two values, and we're always going to get two values for a trig equation between 0 and 360. And I know it's 0 and 360 because a full turn of the handles on the clock is 360 degrees. So if we've got our cast diagram like that, if I look, I know cos x is positive. So if I get cos x being positive, I'm going to get two solutions, one between 0 and 90, and the other one between 270 and 360 degrees. Well, if I solve cos minus 1 equals of 3 over 20, I get the solution between 0 and 90. I can then use that solution and subtract it off of 360 degrees to get my second solution, which lies in that C section between 270 and 360 degrees. So if I did that, I did cos minus 1 of 3 over 20. I'm going to get x equals 81 degrees. So there's my solution in the A section. And I'm going to get a second solution, which is 360, take away the 81. So my two solutions for it are 81 degrees and 279 degrees. I've rounded these to whole numbers. If you kept them with decimal places in, you'd be perfectly fine as well. But that there is the solution. So as intimidating and scary as the question first looked, once we extract the key bits of information, i.e. the equation and the height, and what x means, we're able to then take that and make it into a simple trig equation for us to solve, which we know the technique of because we've gone over the technique many times. We know about arranging it so we get cos x equals, using our cast diagram to find where the solutions lie, and then getting our solutions from that. So following those steps and following it through, once we've broken it down, it actually becomes more straightforward for us to be able to do. Now this question here was 4 marks. First mark you got for setting up your equation. Second mark we got for getting to cos x equals 3 over 20. Your third mark was for one of the solutions. Your fourth mark was for the other solution there. Now as I said, breaking this question down and getting to this point here, that is the key part. Because once we get to there, we know the steps and the technique for solving it. We know how to solve a trig equation question. So it's getting to that stage where we can solve it. Remember, we want to get to a point where we can start to solve it, then we can do it. If we can't, we're screwed. But once we get to that point, it's easy peasy, lemon squeezy.